If you are suffering from overthinking or envy, or maybe you're pushing yourself too hard, or even you feel that you're too lazy and not pushing yourself at all of these things are symptoms that you are suffering from the same thing that me and Emil have been suffering from. You are emotionally poor.
And feeling emotionally poor has been the source of most of the pain both me and Erik has been experiencing in our lives. So we really want to speak with you today about this topic.
If we would have had this conversation with 23-year-old versions of us, they wouldn't understand at all what we were talking about. 23-year-old Erik would never have said that he was needy. Never in a million years he would have said that he has low self-esteem or is emotionally poor, because he didn't understand these concepts. But I can see that now, looking back 10 years, how big that difference is. And in this episode, we will teach you how to go from emotionally poor to being emotionally rich. To do that, you learn how to deal with negative thought patterns, and you will become someone who believes in yourself, someone who is a doer and someone who goes after their dreams.
And if you haven't done so already, you definitely want to press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because today we're going to take a deep dive into the topic of self-esteem. And I'm going to do that together with one of my best friends, Erik Bergman, who is the founder of Great.com. And Erik made over 50 million euros before he turned 30 when he founded his previous company, Catena Media, that went from 0 to 300 employees in just 5 years. And on the side of Great, he's teaching personal development and entrepreneurship to his over 600,000 followers in social media.
Happy to be here. And I'm here with my good friend Emil Ekwart, who is among the smartest people that I know. And he's my creative sparring partner. So I just love doing this podcast with him and creating other kinds of content with him. We're perfectly matched. And he's the host of this podcast, as well as our other charity podcast within Great.com. And on the side of Great, he runs a personal development coaching business where he teaches people how to be more emotionally safe with themselves, how to find their passion, and how to build confidence. He's the perfect guy to talk to about this topic.
Well, thank you. And if you're new here into this podcast, our intention with becoming Great.com is to be the podcast in the world that gives you the most value per minute out of any podcast in the world within personal development or entrepreneurship. And we plan to accomplish this by spending a lot of time preparing and philosophizing and researching each episode. And we also don't have any advertisement because we think it's kind of annoying with advertisement in podcasts. So we want to give this to you advertisement free. And today's episode is divided into 5 different topics. In the first topic, we're going to look at mine and Erik's most painful experiences and how search for sexual and social validation has caused us constant pain in our own lives. In the second topic, we're going to look at the emotional bank account. And having a low emotional bank account is the reason why someone can be even rich and famous, but still sad and depressed on the inside. In the third topic, we're going to look at the reason for low self-esteem and how our negative thought patterns are affecting us and causing us pain. In the fourth topic, we're going to look at the negative self-talk and how to turn that mean voice in your head into something good by understanding the important message that is hidden inside every negative thought. And in the fifth and final topic, we're going to look at our favorite exercise ever to boost our emotional bank account, an exercise that both me and Erik have been doing every day for years now.
There's been so many times when I have come up to my girlfriend and I've initiated sex somehow, and she has turned away from me and clearly shown that that's not what she wants. And this has caused me a lot of sadness and anger and frustration and some deep-rooted pain in my life. And this has happened over and over again. We've been together for 12 years now, almost. And it's almost always me who has been initiating sex. And a lot of the time she has turned me down. And this has been the like main challenge in our entire relationship, like the differences in sexual interest. And it actually even caused us to break up a few years ago because we couldn't find a way of solving this.
Yeah, I can imagine how hard it must be to initiate, and then when she says no, that you feel like, what is wrong with me? Maybe even.
I mean, if not even my own girlfriend kind of wants me,
Right.
she's the one who's supposed to want me. It brings up deep insecurities.
And would you say that relates to having low self-esteem?
Yes. So what I believe is that, and I didn't realize this for most of my relationship, but I can see it looking back now, that I wasn't actually just going for sex. I was going for her showing me with her body and all of her being that I'm good enough, that she wants me, that I'm worthy of love in a sense. I came to her with a very needy energy, kind of saying like, okay, show me that I'm good enough. And when she didn't, then that just made me feel even worse about myself, which creates this spiral of me coming back to her again in an even more needy energy. It's like, I'm not trying to have sex to give her anything. I'm not trying to have sex even for the experience of sex. I'm trying to have sex for the experience of not feeling bad. And I didn't realize all of this. It's this big universe of pain, but I can see looking back that it's to a very large extent the effect of me being emotionally poor and then being needy.
Right. So you're feeling emotionally poor, and then you're trying to get something.
Yeah, I mean,
steal something.
I would never use the
you're not
word
conscious,
emotionally
but-
poor because I didn't even know what that was. But I can see that being the root cause now. That if I wouldn't have come from that energy, then it would have been a completely different situation.
Your reaction would have been completely different.
Everything would have been different. So what have caused you the most pain?
I can very much relate to what you said about feeling needy and wanting to get some kind of validation from Johanna. But I felt in a similar way often, but more in, especially in school when I was a teenager. I felt so needy, like I wanted to have other people tell me that I'm okay. It could be something as silly as I wanted to get good grades. Not so much that I could get good grades, but more that I could show the other people in my class that, look, I got a good grade, and brag about it. But if I got a bad one, I wouldn't show it to anyone else.
Okay, so the grades kind of proved to you that you were good in a sense. And if other people saw that, you kind of felt that they see that I'm good.
Yeah, and that was kind of silly and innocent. What was worse was that I often felt like I entered most social situations with like a feeling of being empty, having an empty cup and like asking people to fill it up for me. So I could so easily spot in the hierarchy in any social situation who is the most popular person, and can I be what this person expects me to be, so that they give me validation. And that could even make me be mean to people that were lower down in the hierarchy, to kind of like make jokes on other people's expense. And I feel really guilty talking about it now because it's so silly.
Because you felt going into like a social group, okay, this person is the person that's important to kind of impress and then doing whatever it takes. And if this person thinks that I'm good, that's got to mean that I'm good in a sense.
Yeah, and I think this is low self-esteem as well. So you try to impress your girlfriend, which is kind of silly. I try to impress people with grades or cool. I had no idea why I was doing it.
Yeah, I can see that. Do you think that's the same pattern then as me with Johanna?
Yeah, I think it's totally the same pattern. And I think having a low emotional bank account or feeling emotionally poor can play out in so many different ways. I think every person has their own way of dealing with feeling emotionally poor.
Yeah, and that it can play out any possible way. Either you're working really hard to get the best grades, or you're working really hard to seduce your girlfriend, or you turn yourself into a bully. And this is just 3 different kinds of symptoms for the same thing, but it can actually play out in pretty much any way possible.
It could be 100 symptoms.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that it's so many different kinds of symptoms on anything. And I would go as far as saying that most emotional pain and most things that we feel pain about or shame or guilt or whatever it is goes down to this, regardless what it looks like. It comes from feeling emotional poor.
I agree.
So let's move on and let's look into a metaphor that we have talked about of the emotional bank account and what that is.
Yes.
So imagine two big bank vaults. One of them, there is like full of gold and diamonds, so like Scrooge McDuck could swim around in it. And the other one is pitch black. It's completely empty and just like this weird smell and like rats running around.
What are you talking about?
Isn't that clear? So you can think about if you're emotionally rich or emotionally poor in a way of two bank accounts, meaning that everyone knows about this financial bank account. You can have all of this money, you can have the diamonds, you can have everything. But if your emotional bank account is empty, you will still feel really bad. It's like a lot of experiences in your life will still feel very painful. And this is rarely talked about. Like we talk a lot about our financial bank account, how important that is. Very few talk about the emotional bank account.
Yeah, and that is why some people can be both rich and famous, but still feel so lonely inside that they might even commit suicide.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one way of thinking about them being emotionally rich or being emotionally poor. And I didn't understand this back when I felt all of this pain with Johanna. So my bank account was really low. So I tried to always get her to kind of fill it up because I didn't know how to fill it up myself. And I did a lot of other things to kind of impress other people, making fun of other people, trying to get them to fill up my bank account.
And raise your financial bank account.
Exactly.
Well. Yeah.
So all of these things happened simply because I felt bad about myself. A lot of it without even knowing it, but that's where that need for someone else to show it. And once I understood this and I learned how to fill this bank account up myself, what actually happened was that I felt a lot less needy, tried to get a lot less sex from Johanna, which ironically led to her wanting to have more sex. So me wanting it less, me chasing her less in a sense, became what actually fixed our sex life to a large extent and is the reason why we're together now when it didn't work before. And I know you worked a lot with your emotional bank account as well after realizing this. How did that change for you?
Yeah, and I understand you had that effect with Johanna because it got a bit tough for her when you were coming and said, please fill up my bank account. So then she can't really
and that's
relax.
still like
right?
energy I was coming from without knowing it myself.
Yeah, exactly. My experience was very similar. That when I switched my energy from trying to impress people or look cool in social situations, and instead focused on, can I spend that time on filling up my own emotional bank account? Then I started entering social situations with a different kind of energy. I felt like I already have I have everything I need here. So I could be more generous. I could give. I was much less needy, which then ironically made people like me more. So I got more social validation.
Yeah, I think what's interesting with this is that if we would have had this conversation with 23-year-old versions of us, they wouldn't understand at all what we were talking about. 23-year-old Erik would never have said that he was needy. Never in a million years he would have said that he has low self-esteem or is emotionally poor because he didn't understand these concepts. But I can see that now looking back 10 years, how big that difference is.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest difference for me was when I was talking with women that I was interested in. Because when my bank account was low, I thought the reason girls don't like me is because I don't have enough magic, right? I don't have the smart things to say, or I don't know how to approach and all that stuff. But like when I started filling up my emotional bank account, I could just go up and say hi and have a normal conversation. And when I didn't have that needy magician energy, it was so much easier for women to relate to me, and it completely changed my dating life.
To be relaxed in those things. I remember
I didn't use her as like why I'm okay.
I remember you talked about this a few years ago. It's like there is so many women that kind of wants me right now. It's like, I don't understand the difference, but now suddenly I'm on such a good streak. It's like, yeah,
and the only thing I did was being normal. Didn't have that much.
but didn't come from a validation-seeking
Yeah.
energy. Didn't feel a need to impress.
Yeah, and I don't like the word normal, but I was just being myself and was nice and social, and yeah.
Okay, so it's clear that being emotional poor has been one of the root causes for our pain. Do you think it's common to be emotionally poor?
Yeah, I think it's so common. I think so many of us are struggling with this to some extent, and the symptoms could be so different. Some people might be overthinking a lot as a symptom of a low emotional bank account. For others, it might be fear of failing or procrastination or being lazy or working way too hard. And I think taking the time to start filling up your bank account can have positive effects in so many areas of your life. Like, what can you imagine would happen if someone starts to fill up their bank account?
I can just look at the causes we've already said. That I wanted more sex and I tried to get more sex from my girlfriend, but by needing it less, it actually made it happen more. By relaxing, in a sense, things got easier. And the way you described it, by being less needy in social situations, you actually got more popular, which kind of was what you were going for in the first run. And I can see this happening, that if you don't care so much what's going to happen, like if you're afraid what other people will think of you, you will be terribly afraid of failing, because that means that you're not good enough. But if you feel that you have a high emotional bank account and you feel that you don't need what other people think about you, failing is not going to be so scary, because it doesn't matter what they think. So if you're afraid of failing, then that comes from that.
And if you're not afraid of failing, you will start doing more action and you will be more likely to succeed anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so there's
you avoid
so many wins in this. So let's move on and look to what is the root cause for being emotionally poor.
Yeah,
what is that?
That's very important to understand.
So I'm sitting in this worn out brown leather couch, and I'm in this smelly, weird looking apartment behind a restaurant, and I'm 20 years old. And next to me in a big leather chair sits a big guy. And I've been big, like around his waist. And he's a guy that I know, and he runs an illegal poker club where I used to play poker. And he has just asked me to invest $3,000 in a Philippine shrimp farm. His wife is from the Philippines, and he says, like, I have all the connections. This is a sure thing. And I mean, I know this guy has a shady background. He runs an illegal poker club, and he has actually already borrowed like $1,000 from me that he hasn't paid back. But yet he sits here and he has this case. He tells me about these things, and I'm thinking, it's like, what should I do? And I end up going to the ATM, and I withdraw $3,000, which is pretty much all the money that I have at this time, and I decide to give them to him.
And what happened?
Well, that was the last time I saw that money, and it was the last time that I saw him. And this is actually the first time I'm telling this story, because I felt just when I gave him the money that this was a bad idea. And I thought, okay, this was stupid, especially when he didn't answer the phone. I tried to follow up on this. Like, I got this feeling of like guilt and shame of letting someone trick me like that, and me being so naive and stupid. And I remember having these thoughts for like years and years of, how could you be so stupid, Erik? What the fuck were you thinking? You idiot. Well, how could you trust him? And that voice just kept going on and on and on. And every time it came back, it got me this feeling in my stomach.
I can imagine how you felt. So help me see the connection then between this story and having a low emotional bank account.
So you could look at the currency of the emotional bank account as being your self-talk. Like, what does the voice in your head say about you? So in my case, when the voice was telling me, oh, Erik, you're so stupid, you're so naive, you're an idiot, and all of these things, that drained my bank account of even more.
Okay.
And I got even harder on myself.
Right. So if the voice in your head is nice and kind to you, you grow your emotional bank account. But if that voice is mean and negative and criticizing you, then your emotional bank account gets depleted.
Exactly. So when my voice was telling me bad things, and obviously it did that in all kinds of situations, this is just one example, I needed Johanna to show me that I was good enough, or I needed some popular kid to laugh at my joke for me to feel that I was good enough. So because the voice said bad things, then I needed someone else to say good things.
Yeah, I like that. So when your voice is mean, it becomes hard because then you need other people constantly to telling nice things about you. So this negative voice in your head came from you doing something that you judged as stupid, and then you started telling yourself that you were stupid.
Yeah, this voice was just me looking at my own experience and basically saying bad things to myself about it.
I have one memory that is so vivid about a time when I had a voice planted by another person.
Okay.
So I was in 5th grade in school, and I was out on the breaks playing soccer. I was sweaty, I was dirty, and I didn't think of that. And then I came back in after recess, and I walked through the hallway. I passed by the most popular girl in our class that was 1 year older, and the most popular one. And she just looked at me with disgust and told me, like, "You're so disgusting," looking at me being sweaty and dirty. And that moment just changed my perception, because before that, I thought of being sweaty. Of course I'm sweaty. When I'm playing sports, I never thought about it. But after that, that kind of changed my relationship to what sweat mean. I think after that moment, I started telling myself in my head that when I'm sweaty, I'm disgusting.
Okay, so before sweaty was just sweaty. And just
Yeah.
because of her words, when you were sweaty, you were disgusting.
Yeah, maybe because I started repeating her words in my mind that, okay, when I'm sweating, I'm disgusting. So when I'm sweating, I should stay away from people because it's disgusting. So when I was in high school later, I really didn't want to sit even, next to a girl on the same bench when I was sweaty. And I was sweating often at that time. Yeah, and it was super hard.
This thought has kept repeating itself for years then.
For years, yeah, at least 15 years after that. I never wore colorful clothes in high school or college after that because I didn't want anyone to see that I was sweating.
Wow.
When I was 17, I even went to a clinic where they do Botox treatment, and I had injections in my armpits that blocked me from sweating. And then it was the first time in years where I could wear colorful shirts.
Wow. I think it's interesting to look at this. Like, okay, so the voice can come from within me, which might have been just me repeating something that had been said at another point. Like maybe someone had told me I'm stupid and it kind of triggered this. Or it can come from such a trivial situation as walking by someone in school or having your parents say or whatever. I mean, I can probably come up with 10 different stories that are similar to this where someone has planted something in me or I started saying something.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's such a tiny thing can have a ripple effect for many years. And both of us have had relatively good upbringings. But I understand how hard it must be for someone that has been in a more negative environment to have gotten maybe these tiny triggers all the time, how much negative self-talk that must have created.
Yeah, and then you have that currency loop from the emotional bank account. Every time you tell yourself I'm disgusting, you drain your bank account.
Yeah,
and it just keeps on going.
And especially stuff that have happened when you're younger, right? Because when you're small, I think you're so much more receptive to people, especially authority. which could be especially a parent or the coolest girl in class, or maybe a teacher or a coach, or
it hurts more the cooler the person is, unfortunately.
yeah. So how about we move to the next topic and we look at how can we then deal with this negative voice in a useful way.
So one of the most common questions that I get is, how do I stop my negative thinking? What would you answer to that?
Well, you can think of your negative thinking as, imagine that you have a big wound on your arm and you're in a lot of pain. You can think of the negative thinking as the pain that is coming from that wound. And that pain is not really trying to hurt you. It's trying to show you that, we're hurt here. We should place our attention to this wound and take action somehow. And
the pain is not the body. The body wants to care for you. That's why it sends pain. It's not meant for you to just feel pain.
yeah, I think that is the purpose of pain.
Yeah.
And I know how tempting it is to want to distract yourself from pain. So if you feel emotional pain, it's very tempting to, instead of looking at that, maybe watch the television or eat some crisps or watch pornography or, anything that you do to feel differently. But if you want, that is kind of the same thing as taking this wound and just take a painkiller and hope it goes away.
Yeah.
But of course, that is not the best way to heal the wound. If you want to heal that wound, you need to take the time to clean it. And cleaning the wound is going to make it hurt more, unfortunately, when it's being cleaned. But when you clean a wound, it can heal.
Okay, so the negative thoughts doesn't necessarily want to hurt you. They're the pain that comes from a wound to bring your attention to it and telling you that this wound needs cleaning.
Yeah, exactly.
Not distraction.
Yeah.
And it's easy to distract yourself from the pain. But here we want to look at the pain, we want to clean the wound and learn from that experience. We don't want to stop the negative thoughts. We want to use them as a signal, as saying cleaning is needed.
Exactly. We want to clean this wound. And maybe this is easier if we look at an example. So do you have some example or story where you had negative thinking and we can look at how we can clean it?
Because I remember this smug grin and I just want to punch him in the face. It's, I think, 11 years ago, and me and Johanna just started dating. And I'm at this party, and the guy I know is there. We're not really friends, but we've known each other in the same group, and we've always been kind of rivals. I've always disliked this guy. And he tells me with this big cocky grin and a loud voice that, yeah, Erik, just before you guys started dating, Johanna followed me home after the nightclub, really wanting everyone else to kind of hear that.
In front of other people?
Yeah, in front of other people. And it's like, not him. I got so disgusted by this. Like, out of every people in the world, how could she with this guy? And yeah, that thought just kept coming back, bothering me, and a thought and like vivid images of whatever might have happened. And I remember calling her and being like really angry at her for obviously no valid reason. She could do whatever she wanted before we met. Or she can still do whatever she wants, but that's a different side of things. But she obviously hadn't done anything wrong, but I was still disgusted with this and angry with this. And that's just a thought pattern that kept coming back.
And how did you try to deal with this voice at the time?
So whenever it came up, I just tried to push it away. I didn't want to look that way. I didn't want to feel that anger and that disgust. I didn't want to picture his smug face. I definitely didn't want to picture anything else. I just tried to distract myself from it and stop thinking about it.
So you didn't feel like you had any tools to create something positive out of that negative voice?
I didn't even have the idea that it could be something positive
it's just
from
like,
it.
This is just hurting me, let's get it away.
I just wanted to be done with it.
So now you're a bit older and you had spent time interacting with your negative voices. So how would you kind of, when this voice and these images are in your head now, how would you deal with them as more mature?
Yeah, so this actually came back to haunt me not that long ago. Like 6 months ago, I started thinking about this again. And once again, I wanted to just push these thoughts away. I didn't want to think about this. 11 years later, it's still coming back and it bothers me and it makes me look at her in a different way. And it just
so the wound has obviously not healed.
The wound has not healed. It's still infected because I haven't cleaned it in 11 years. So what I did now was that I asked myself, okay, what do I need to believe is true for this to bother me? I obviously need to think something for this to happen. It needs to mean something, this disgust. And for this to bother me, I needed to think that it was a threat somehow. Like, if it is a threat, it makes sense that it bothers me. If it's not a threat, it doesn't make that much sense that it bothers me. So I came to that conclusion, okay, I need to think that this is a threat. And when this happened 11 years ago, it was a threat. Like, Johanna could have left me for this guy when I found out. Maybe she liked him better. I don't know. It was a threat to her being with me, and
a threat to your status, maybe.
Yeah, that
group.
was a threat to, like, he made fun of me in front of my friends, and that was a threat to, like, my status. When this happened, it made sense that I tensed up, that I got angry, that I got disgusted, and all of these things. It was a threat to my ego and my self-image of some kind of an alpha male, the only one the girls wanted or whatever. So when I was sitting with this thought, I was like, okay, is it a threat? Like, is it likely that Johanna would leave me for this guy 11 years later? It's like, no, that's probably not going to happen. If she was going to leave me for him, she would have done it a long time ago. And, okay, so that's not true anymore. Then I asked myself, okay, is it still a threat to, like, my position in some kind of a friend group hierarchy? Can he make fun of me in front of other people due to this? It's like, I don't think anyone's going to care about what happened 11, 12 years ago. So that's not a threat either. So I realized that, okay, this had actually been real threats at the time. So it made sense back then that this bothered me a lot. And since I hadn't, like, tried to clean this wound at all, I've just distracted myself. I never took the time to ask myself, is it still a threat? Is there something I can learn from here? Instead, every time it came back, I tried to get that feeling away, and it just ruined my day because I didn't try to understand it. But just by asking myself that question, like, what do I need to believe here? And understanding that there is some kind of threat to believe, and then asking myself, okay, are these things still true? And it took some time to get here, and it's not a very simple process, but it's been very valuable to get to that conclusion.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you're looking for, okay, maybe what do you need here as well? I need to feel safe. Do I feel safe? And you can start to find, very deeper reasons. And what I like about what you're doing here is that you are taking the time to listen to yourself. And I think that becomes such a key part to start to understand this negative voice, to start listening to it. Okay, so you started asking this voice questions. So do you feel like it's healed now, or is there still pain?
I think that I'm healed. I think I'm above that situation now.
So when you think of him, do you still feel anger towards him?
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, I still feel anger towards him.
Yeah. Why do you think you're angry?
Because he made fun of me in front of other people, and because his smug grin, because I didn't punch him in the face.
So why do you think he was acting the way he was acting?
Probably because he wanted to kind of climb in the social hierarchy, in a sense.
Yeah.
He wanted to prove himself.
Yeah. And it's unfair for me to ask you to be empathic for him, because if you still feel angry, I think it's fine to be angry until you have expressed that, right?
Yeah.
But I think you're right.
I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. Like, okay, so where were he coming from here? I mean, if if I look at what like my emotions think, they think that he did this just to piss me off.
Yeah.
That he did this because he's a genuinely bad human being. But with that question that you asked, why do you think that he did it? And in the context of like emotional bank account,
Yeah.
he probably did it because he wanted to get the laughter from the rest of the group.
I could have been him, unfortunately.
So I could be the one punching you in the face now, and this could all be done. No, I think it's a very valuable question, and so I would say that I still feel angry with him. I still feel it's something in me that wants revenge for whatever happened. But just putting it in the context of, was he really trying to hurt me, or was he just needing validation? Was he just trying to build himself up because he felt insecure himself? Probably.
Yeah.
And it makes it easier to deal with that thought.
Yeah. And I think it's totally okay for you to be angry. That you can even tell yourself, it's okay that I'm angry, because that is actually filling up your emotional bank account. If you tell yourself, I'm so judgmental for being angry at him, then that's depleting your bank account.
Yeah.
So it's totally fine.
Yeah, there's both sides of that. So I'm feeling less angry just thinking about it. And not because that it's bad to feel angry, just because it's easier to understand when you see, when I picture him saying these things from a very validation needy energy, and the same kind of fear that I felt in various situations, than it is to think of it as just a genuinely bad human being.
Then the right thing would be to wish him something that would fill up his emotional bank account.
Yeah, let's not
or
push
punch him in the face.
Yeah, let's not push it.
Okay, so we've been talking about having a negative loop in our mind. And when that negative voice is there, it's just going to repeat and repeat and repeat until we take the time to clean this wound. And we clean the wound by starting asking ourselves questions, trying to really understand ourselves. And we do that by becoming better listeners. If you want to become a better listener, we have made 3 episodes on listening. Which episode is it?
76, 77,
Yeah, and everything we speak about in those 3 episodes, you can use with your internal voice to transform it from a negative voice to a voice that is filling up your bank account.
Yeah. And this is, for me, this is a much better way of dealing with a negative voice than is to trying to stop it.
Yeah.
Actually listening to it, and it hasn't come back in a negative way. It hasn't triggered any negative emotions in me since then, because I've actually understood why it was there from the first place. What did it want? And it's probably the same thing that if you were doing a similar exercise with Emil feeling sweaty and disgusting, you could probably find answers and understandings here that made you actually want to listen to that voice.
Yeah. And maybe her emotional bank account wasn't so high either. So how about we
Probably
proceed and look at how can we create a process for cleaning your emotional wounds?
Okay, so this is the time to bring your pen and paper out, because this process is golden. It will help you how to clean the wound and learn to understand your own emotions. So what's the first step?
So the first step is to acknowledge when you feel a strong negative emotion and you start hearing the negative self-talk. Instead of thinking to yourself that that is a bad thing, look at it as the pain coming from a wound. And now is the time to clean.
Okay, so just be aware this is happening.
Exactly.
Feel the pain and be aware of it.
Exactly.
And not let yourself on an autopilot just distract yourself.
Right.
Okay, so what's next?
Step 2 is to find a calm place where you can explore this emotion. So if you're on the subway or in a meeting, maybe it's not the best time to clean the wound, but you can clean it later. So you want to find a place where you're not distracted.
Okay, I actually remember doing that when I had these thought patterns about the guy, that I sat down and like, okay, let's understand this.
Yeah, so
and it's hard to understand it.
Yeah, so you don't always need to take it in the moment, but when you have an emotional reaction, you can almost put it on your to-do list that, okay, later I'll find a calm moment and deal with this.
Yeah, or do it right away if you can find a calm place, but don't try to deal with it in a meeting.
No.
No, that's good. Okay, and what's the third step?
Well, the third step now, when you have acknowledged, I feel this strong negative emotion, I found a calm place, is to just feel the emotion and then start asking questions to the negative voice or maybe even to the emotion and try to understand it. So if you were to do this, like what kind of questions would you be asking yourself?
Okay, so the first question that I like here is the one I brought up before. It's like, what do I need to believe to feel this way?
Yeah, I really like that one, because if you don't believe something, you're not going to feel something. You have to put a meaning on a situation, otherwise you're not going to have any feelings about it.
No, and that might be complicated in itself. Like that concept would probably deserve to be explained deeper, but basically for everything you feel, you need to, your brain is creating that feeling. Like shame, your brain is creating it. Guilt, your brain is creating it. And to be able to create it, you need to think that you did something wrong or think that someone thinks something about you. And you need to think something about it.
Yeah.
So the question here is like, okay, what do I need to think? And in this case, like, okay, I need to think that there is a threat.
Yeah.
Because then it doesn't make sense.
I love that question. I ask it pretty much every time I have a negative emotion. I ask, what do I need to believe is true in order to feel this way?
Yeah, and it can be the same. If you just look at the anger that I felt towards him or still feel towards him, what I need to believe is true, that he's doing this to hurt me.
Yeah.
If I believe he's doing this because he feels like shit and that he just needs to fill up his bank account, then suddenly it doesn't feel so...
It's different.
It doesn't make me angry anymore. So it goes for both these things. So that's the first thing that I like to ask myself. And the second question here becomes, do I know this is true?
I love
As
that
I
question.
said in the example as well, that, okay, so do I know that it's true that it's a threat to Johanna leaving me? No, it's not true, which makes it easier to deal with. It used to be true. It's not anymore. Do I know that it's a threat to my position in the social hierarchy or whatever? It's not true. So it's the same question there as well. Those two questions get me a long way. What questions do you ask yourself?
Yeah, I think those questions goes a long way. You can almost like keep repeating them and finding deeper layers of the core reason for why you feel the way you do, almost like peeling an onion. I like the empathy question we asked in the example as well, of asking, okay, why do I think the other person act the way the other person act? Because when we see it from their point of view, it often doesn't make so much sense to be maybe angry or frustrated.
No, exactly. And probably I could add to that, do I think that this person is genuinely a bad person trying to hurt me?
Yeah.
Because my instinct tells me that that's what happens. Looking back, I see him as a genuinely horrible human being. And I realize it's probably not so horrible. He's probably an insecure young kid.
Yeah, and it's not really helping you to think that way either.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. So those three questions, I would say, is so beneficial.
So to summarize this first aid kit then, is that step one, acknowledge that you feel a negative emotion.
And realize that that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. 2, find a calm place where you can feel this emotion.
Yeah.
And 3, start asking questions to the negative voice in your head. Try to understand why you feel the way you do.
Yeah, and this can take a long time. But there is, personally, I believe that in all difficult emotions, there are messages that are just tricky to see at the first place.
For sure. And like, if you never cleaned any wounds in your life, it might be overwhelming at first. But if you keep doing this process, at some point, you're going to have way less emotional reactions and a much more higher emotional bank account.
Yeah, definitely.
So how about we move on to the next topic and look at our favorite exercise to fill up the bank account. We talked so much about how to not deplete it, but how to get, emotionally rich.
Yeah, let's do that.
So we're going to share with you now a powerful exercise for how to raise up your emotional bank account. And both me and Erik have been doing this exercise for years now, and it's really working. But before we share what it is, you need to understand why you're doing it. And to understand why you're doing it, you need to understand what it is that actually fills up your emotional bank account. So, Erik, how do you fill up your emotional bank account?
It's very simplified. Every time you think something kind or good about yourself, oh, I did this good, or this is good about me, or this feels nice, you make a deposit to your bank account. And it could be someone else saying good things about you as well, because that will trigger you to think positively about yourself, and you will cash in on your bank account. And every time you think something negatively, you judge yourself somehow. Okay, I'm so bad, I'm so this, or someone says something bad about you that you believe in, because that will then keep repeating yourself, like you're sweaty or whatever it is. You drain your bank account of money, or whatever you want to call it. So what you want to do here is you want to get really good at thinking positive thoughts about yourself. That's the key.
And that is the deposits. So
Exactly.
how do you get into the habit then of thinking more positive thoughts? Because I guess that's easier said than done.
Okay, so let's look at how the brain works. Because it's easy to think that you just need a more positive life, but that's not what you need. You need to change your brain autopilot, we could say. So imagine that you are walking around in the city of Stockholm. You're shopping all day, because I know you love to do that. And then you get hungry. And up until now, you haven't really noticed restaurants anywhere, because your brain haven't thought about that restaurants is important. But now when you're hungry, you're like telling your brain subconsciously, like, okay, I need food, I need restaurants. Then suddenly you notice, okay, that's a restaurant, that's a restaurant, that's a restaurant, and that's a restaurant. Because you told your brain that restaurants are important, you suddenly notice all of them, and you no longer notice clothing stores, for example.
And before I didn't even see them.
Exactly. Have you had this experience?
Oh yeah, many times. I was just a couple of weeks ago, I needed to dry clean a carpet, which is not something I do often. So where is a dry cleaner? And I went down to the shopping district where I live, and I saw there are 3 dry cleaners here. I never noticed.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. So once you tell your brain this is important, this is what you're going to notice. And this is the scary part, because your brain is already programmed by default mode to notice what are potential threats. Because if you're living on the savannah, a lion can come and eat you. That's more important than, oh, I look pretty today wearing my lion skin, or whatever you had.
Got it. You walk by on the savannah, you miss an apple. Not a big deal. You miss a snake. Big deal.
Exactly. So your autopilot in your brain is noticing what are potential threats. What are people saying that's bad about me? What am I doing? What is bad? So your autopilot to actually drain your bank account. And this is what you want to train yourself to shift. So you want to get better at noticing all the good things.
And here's where the exercise comes in.
Yes.
Right. So how about you show me? I can be the one doing the exercise, and you can ask me the questions.
Sure. Okay, so what we do here is that we tell our brain to look for what are positive and important things. And the first question to ask ourselves is, what do you appreciate about someone else today? So what do you appreciate?
About someone else?
About me, obviously.
No, actually, me and Erik started doing wrestling, and I appreciate our wrestling trainer because he's asking good questions and is being pedagogic. I enjoy spending time with him.
Oh, that's really nice. Okay, so what do you appreciate about yourself today?
I appreciate that I felt I got into this podcast with enthusiasm, and I appreciate the personality trait of enthusiasm in myself.
Yeah, I appreciate that about you as well, so I can put that on my list.
Thank you.
And then the third and final question is, what is something you appreciate about today in general?
I really appreciate that we have recorded this podcast again after a long break. I'm so excited to be back.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. So what we did here was that we told your brain that what is important is what you appreciate in someone else, what you appreciate in you, and what you appreciate about your day in general. And what the both of us do is that we do this exercise every evening with just pen and paper. I write down the answers to these 3 questions every day. And I've done that for about 5 years now. And the trick is to always come up with new things. And that's not always so easy, because after a while, I've written down a lot of things that I appreciate about Johanna. It's getting tricky to come up with more. I've written down a lot of things I appreciate about myself. It's getting tricky to come up with more. And this is the beauty about this exercise, because that means I need to lower the bar a lot sometimes to come up with new things. Maybe sometimes I appreciate, oh, it was really nice to drink water today. which is something I wouldn't necessarily look for appreciation for. And every time I think that thought, it fills up my bank account a little bit. And the beauty here is not that I'm doing it every evening, is that my brain gets wired to look for these things during the day because it knows that it's going to be tested in the evening. So I've practiced to get my brain to constantly look for, okay, what did I do good today? Because I need to write it down in the evening. What did Emil or other people around me do good today? And I need to find that. And what's good about this day? And I need to find that. So I'm telling my brain to create this autopilot to actually find things that fill up my bank account. And I notice so many small things now that I never saw before. And it's all thanks to this exercise.
And this enthusiasm as well is telling your brain that this is important for me. Because if you're not enthusiastic about it,
exactly.
then your brain, it's not going to work.
Yeah. And one of the beautiful things about this exercise as well is since I get better at noticing what's good in other people, I more often say it, and it's a genuine compliment because I genuinely appreciate that, which makes other people around me happier and more likely that they will say nice things about me. So I fill up your bank account or anyone else's bank account, and in return they fill up mine. So it's such a simple exercise that trains your brain to look for the positive things in the world and change the default setting from looking for lions that might eat you. I mean, it would be good to look for lions if there were any, but there are not that many lions here in Stockholm. And instead look for the positive things.
I think that I really liked what you said about it as well by lowering the bar. Because I think such a big mistake is to only give ourselves praise when we do something fantastic. Like we graduate, woo! Yeah. But like the more you lower the bar, the better. Because it doesn't matter what it is you like. It just matters that you practice to like things.
Yeah.
To get that I like stuff. It doesn't matter what stuff is. I remember wrote down once that I'm so proud of myself because I walked to the refrigerator, got a cup of water, and it didn't fall down like one time. Like a champ. Like a champion, I walked to the fridge.
If that was the thing you remembered from that day that you were proud of, it's got to be a pretty shitty day. But I applaud you for coming up with something.
I did it with the intention of lowering my bar, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter what it is. It just matters that you practice appreciating stuff.
Yeah. Now it gets more normal for you to say nice things about yourself and about other people.
Well said. You make it more normal. You make your default state is positive, appreciative.
Yeah. Default state is
feeling proud
in on the bank account.
Yeah, you can make deposits all day. Okay, so to summarize this exercise, what you're going to do is that at the same time every day, preferably before you go to bed, you're going to write down 3 things. First, you're going to write down something that you like and appreciate about someone else. Then you're going to write down something that you like and appreciate about yourself. And then thirdly, you're going to write down something you like and appreciate about your day in general. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I was going to say something else, but I realized this exercise is so simple, but yet so powerful. It's just about keep doing it, being consistent.
Yeah. One thing that I want to add to that is that I miss days every now and then, and I just make sure to write it back in time. So I actually keep doing it. So I have done every single date for like 5 years, but sometimes I did 3 days in a row. So it's just important. Feels good for my ego to say that I'm consistent. Feels good to say every day.
I like it. Okay, so do you have some more value that you want to give here?
Yes. One more thing that I want you to think about is that don't waste your downtime in any given day. Use that time to listen to books or podcasts. Don't play games on your phone. Be productive, improve your life, especially if you have like a train ride or a bus ride or a car ride to work. Use that time to listen to podcasts because that way you can make your life a lot better. And if you haven't listened to all of the becominggreat.com podcasts, we have like 80 plus episodes, which all of them are amazing. Not so much. A lot of them are really, really good. So start and like looking at that back catalog. And if someone wants to help out this podcast to make it better, what would you tell them to do?
If you want to help us out somehow, you definitely want to go to YouTube or your podcast app and press subscribe. Because we're a quite small podcast still. But if we have a lot of subscribers in comparison to how many people are listening, then that sends signal that this podcast is important. We should be in the top of the playlists. And then more people can hear the kind of conversations that we had today, so they can start filling up their emotional bank account. And just imagine what can happen if more people feel emotionally rich.
And we will want to do more episodes because we want to keep the positions in top list. And we
Sha-sha.
actually have top list positions now
top
in
list,
various
yes.
countries. Thank you for
That's
today.
so much fun. See you in the next episode.
Cheers.